Hey, Mike Amundsen here to talk to you more about designing and building great web APIs. In this screencast, I'm going to show you within just a few minutes how you can define your own resources using the DARRT library that's tied to Express and Node. So let's get right into it. So as I've been talking about this for a couple of screencasts now, I've been talking about this idea of the way I build APIs. So a really good example here is just a really simple API that returns a pointer to a list, and I can actually see that list as well by just getting these records here. So how do I get these records? Where is this coming from? Well, this is really the response on a resource requests. I'm doing these URLs for resource requests. So what does that really look like? Let's take a look at what that is. And this is this DARRT library we've talked about in previous screencasts: data, actions, resources, representations, and transitions. The 5 key elements of a good, healthy web API. The data is what we manage. The actions are how we manage it. Resources is how we use HTTP to get to those things. Representations are the way we represent responses, and transitions are the actions we put in responses so we can do more actions over and over again, the circle of life and all that kind of stuff. So let's just take a look at this a little bit here, and we'll look at our resource library. So the resource library ties directly to Express. There's just a few extra things. I use some little initialization. We'll talk about that later. Some cool metadata. I always carry metadata around with me in case I want to squirt that into a representation when I send it back. The title, the author, the release, when it was generated, its URL. You can add just about anything you want. This is just a little test routine. And here's where I really get interesting. So this should look really familiar if you used Node and Express before. These are my gets and put and posts. So that you might use app-get or router-get or even an object.get. What's really interesting is the way I use it in my DARRT library. So you'll actually see that what happens here is I'm setting up a large argument collection. So I'm taking the request, the response, indicating the action that's tied to this URL, right? So I have this HTTP get to a root, which is tied to the actions.home, and then some other information about the configuration of how I'm going to send the response back. So that's really how this works. Now, down towards the bottom, there's a little bit of information about how that responder works its magic. It returns this, it calls this thing called a utility handler for with request, response, action, object, and configuration. Here's some other initialization setups for our router, for some where the actions and the representations and the transitions are, and the templates and the forms and links and all that basic stuff. But really, it's all about this notion of how setting up all these actions. You can set up as many as you wish. Now, you'll note again, the root says, give me the home object, actions.home. So let's go back and take a look at what that really is going to look like here. We'll go over here again. And this is the actions.home. There's my home object. And my home object is really just a set of lists and links. And now my list object, you can see from the actions.list, if I went over here to this other side here and just looked a little bit further, there's not a post function here. There's my list function. It basically says I'm going to do the actions.list. So when I come back over here and move, and say I want to see the list, then it actually executes the list function. So all I'm doing is associating an action with a URL. So I can pretty easily change that association anytime I want. So in my case, what I'm actually going to do is change the home association, the get home association, to a different action. So I'm actually going to just change this to list. So I'm going to say, hey, when you go to the root, actually just send me to the list action. I'm going to go back here. And now, let's do a little clearing here. Get this out of the way. Clear this up. Now when I do the home action, I get the list. So the association is very loose and very direct and very simple. All I need to say is what action is associated with this URL. And that's really the key to the way we use resources in the DARRT library. Now, I've talked to you about transitions. I've talked to you about data. I really haven't talked to you about the actions themselves. And that's what we'll do in the next unit when we talk about actions and how actions work when you're designing great web APIs. So I hope you'll catch the bug at the top. You'll see there's a whole series, and I'll talk to you again soon. So long for now.